All good debates have a counter argument. So we're going to start off the evening with a special guest who will be presenting the other side of the debate, if you will. Please help me welcome Bentley Beaverbrook III.
Take your seat, please. Time is money. Let's not waste time. Thank you so much. Ma'am, good to see you. Good to see you all tonight. It's wonderful to come to Vancouver and see so many people who love money as much as I do. I must say, it always brings a tear to my eye when I walk around the streets of Vancouver and I smell the opportunity in the air. So it really is wonderful to be here tonight. But my friends, we are here because we face a crisis. In fact, I'm talking about money. Big, beautiful money. And there are those among us who would want to ban it. Ban it like you would banish a common leper from the hot tub on the family yacht. Let's talk about rights. Let's talk about human rights. Because corporations are people, and they deserve a voice in the political process, just the same as dead people deserve to vote in BC Liberal leadership races. Am I right? Am I right? My friends, we face the greatest challenge to corporate power in a generation. The profits of many of my wealthiest offshore investor friends are literally at stake. And in fact, our hammerlock on the BC government is slipping, like David Cameron wrestling a pig in a vat of Vaseline. We must take action. And that is why tonight I am announcing my candidacy for the big money party of British Columbia. Our job is to put power back in the hands of those who have truly earned it, or inherited it, or embezzled it. My platform is one of proportional representation. You deserve representation in Victoria proportional to the amount of money you're willing to give me right now. The starting bid is $10,000. Shall we kick it off? $10,000. Can we get a starter bet? $10,000. No? What about a unique sponsorship opportunity? This forearm is currently open if you want to tattoo your logo for the next time I roll up my sleeves at the Chamber of Commerce pancake breakfast. No? A buttock of your choice, $100,000? How's this for an exclusive offer? This piece of real estate, $1 million. It's a little bit sweaty right now, but just imagine every media opportunity, every press conference, your logo shining like a beacon of freedom and wealth, because that's really what it's all about, isn't it? My friends, we have an election next year. I urge you to vote for the big money party of British Columbia, innocent until proven guilty. And now I'm going to remove this horrible ascot because wearing it makes me feel like a bad person and makes me very sweaty. So I'm Kai, I work at Dogwood. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about money in politics. And seriously, our politicians have more corporate sponsors than NASCAR drivers. And in fact, the only reason why we know who funds these elections is because of a court action that Dogwood undertook back in 2005 to force disclosure of who actually funds elections in this province. So you are going to find some of this information shocking. I hope some of it will spur you to action. For example, the fact that our 2017 election is sponsored by companies like Kinder Morgan, Enbridge, and TransCanada. So Kinder Morgan, of course, is proposing a massive oil sands bitumen export terminal here in Burnaby, and Enbridge, although they just recently got kicked to the curb by the federal court, has spent 12 years working with the government of China to try to get a bitumen port on the north coast. TransCanada donated another $130,000 to the BC Liberals. They are the ones who want to ship gas to the Skeena River to the Petronas LNG plant. So these are the folks who are funding our elections. Just a tiny sampling of some of the other companies. There are hundreds. Petronas, of course, the Malaysian state-owned gas company that has proposed the Pacific Northwest LNG plant. Spectra Energy, another big player in the pipeline industry. BNSF Railway, that's Warren Buffett's, his coal train and oil train company that would service the Fraser Surrey Docks project, which is owned by Macquarie, an Australian company, also a donor to the governing party. Suncor Energy, big player in the Alberta oil sands. Canadian Natural Resources, another oil sands company. The list goes on and on. Funny note about Canadian Natural Resources, that's a company controlled by Murray Edwards, a very wealthy man who just left Alberta because the taxes were too high and moved to London. We'll see what happens there. He's also the man behind Imperial Metals, which of course is responsible for the Mount Polly disaster. I only bring it up because the BC government gave them the all clear to continue operations last week unchanged. It is not a coincidence that Murray Edwards has raised over $1 million for the governing party here in BC. So total corporate donations to the BC Liberals from oil companies, gas, coal, and the mining industry, at least $8.6 million. This is based on figures assembled by our friends at Integrity BC. And my question to you is, what questions does that raise for you as a citizen who has to live in this province? The floor is open. That's since 2005, between 2005 and 2015, so the decade that's been disclosed up till now by the party. More recently, obviously, from the LNG proponents, it wasn't an industry until a few years ago, and so we're seeing, since the 2013 election, a major uptick in donations from big polluters. Yeah?
Are they limited in terms of the size or the amount that they can give?
Fantastic question. There are no limits in British Columbia. Any individual, corporation, numbered company, union, or investor anywhere in the world can donate unlimited money to any politician or political party in BC. Even the United States, as screwed up as their system is, does not allow donations from outside the country. BC is unique in that respect. Any other questions this raises just for you? Is it, yeah, in the back. Say that again? It has been suggested that the acronym, yes, be changed to reflect this sad political reality. Yeah, gentleman over here. Well, the thing about British Columbia is that we control our own election laws provincially, and it's the lawmakers who make the laws. So they are the politicians who are getting elected, and they set the rules for those elections. And so since we launched this campaign, the provincial government has doubled down and said they're not going to change the law around donations because, of course, they have to fight an election next year, and they're busy raising all that cash. The feds have no jurisdiction over BC elections. So far, we haven't found a legal hole in the armor to involve the federal government. What I should mention is that, of course, BC also controls the rules for municipal governments. So this is true at the municipal level as well. So in Vancouver elections, you have a situation where a developer named Rob McDonald could write $1 million check to a political party, and that's completely legal. You can funnel money into the country from anywhere in the world into a municipal or provincial election in BC. So that's what we're dealing with. Yeah?
Do the donations also include property or sort of barter kinds of products, or is it actual money?
That's cash. There's also a separate category for in-kind donations. For example, if you send your staff to work a shift in an election, you would have to count that as an in-kind donation. Yeah, one more question.
Is it possible to have a legal action under the Constitution against that?
Not that we've found so far. The key appears to be changing that legislation, but it's controlled by the majority in the House, and they get reelected by taking unlimited money from corporations who then have a vested interest in the political process. So we're stuck in a very vicious cycle that we're trying to break. Yeah, gentleman back there.
I just want to point out that my MLA did introduce legislation to curb that and got the NDP and the Greens to vote for it, but the Liberals all voted against it.
That's Ms. Huntington?
Yeah.
In Delta. Yeah. So there have been efforts, well received, those symbolic efforts, because if you have 1 out of 85 or 87 seats in the legislature, it's hard to ram legislation through. So we'll talk about some of the pathways to changing the situation later on in the evening. I just want to bring you up to date on Christy Clark's response to this campaign so far. So this was on CBC Radio last month, where she said, "Whatever anybody tells me or donates to me or my party, it cannot be connected to decisions we make on behalf of the people in BC, and it's not." So that is a flat denial from the Premier that these donations have anything to do with the policy decisions made by her government. This is her with Mr. Tanoto, the Indonesian billionaire and burner of rainforests, who has proposed a wood fiber LNG facility in Howe Sound, which of course got approved. So you don't have to look very far to see connections between the people who are happily funding the party and results that politicians decide that benefit the people who they get money from. Not to let these guys off the hook, does anybody not know who the man is on the screen? Don't be shy. It's okay, put your hand up. It's actually normal. In fact, the majority of people in BC don't know who this guy is. So this is John Horgan, the leader of the BC NDP, and the man who wants to be premier next year. And on paper, he supports LNG, supports the fracking industry, and he supports U.S. thermal coal exports, which is disappointing as a group that's worked on these issues from the environmental side. Because when you have a governing party that's enthusiastically promoting these industries and an opposition party that's afraid to stake out a different position, you're left with very few options as a voter. On the subject of Kinder Morgan, Mr. Horgan said to the National Observer last month, when he was asked directly over the phone for his take on the project, at this point, I don't see how this is in the public interest of British Columbia, and we'll see how the discussion goes in the next year or so. It's incredibly frustrating to see the party take a position against the project at the National Energy Board or in letters to the federal government, and then when he's actually confronted with the question, isn't able to come up with a clear answer that would hold through the next election. And so,
Wasn't that the reason that they lost the last election? Because that's what apparently is why people voted against the NDP.
I have a different theory. Who's this guy? No? Anybody know who that is on the left? That's Tom Sigurdsson. So he's the head of the BC Building Trades Association. And this is a union that's very much in favor of all of these projects because it would mean short-term employment for their members. And the same goes for a number of other unions like the Longshore Union, the Steelworkers. And so the BC NDP, since 2005, has raised almost $56 million up to the end of last year. And 11.6 of that has come from unions, including these large donations. When you look at the steelworkers, I've tacked on an extra $300,000 because they neglected to disclose a check last year in that amount from the Steelworkers Union, which supports all of these major fossil fuel projects, again, because of jobs for their members. When John Horgan wrote a letter to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency opposing the Petronas LNG plant in the Skeena River, he was called on the carpet publicly by Tom Sigurdsson, the head of the building trades and a major donor to his party, who forced him to apologize and recant his position. And so the influence of the building trades and other labor unions are I would say, not too difficult to connect the dots. In 2013, when you go and look up the NDP's donations, you see that they raised a huge amount of cash. In fact, they raised more money than the BC Liberals because, of course, everybody thought they were going to win. And so that's how the system works in BC, is you just back whatever horse you think is going to win, regardless of ideology. Then what happened? The BC Liberals pulled off a surprise victory, and a banner at one of the parties that they held with their donors after that surprise election win reportedly said, "We won, it's Christmas every day." And what they mean by that is that when you're in government, you have the power not only to make decisions over these major projects, but also to award contracts, huge amounts of public money that go towards things like IT services, hospital laundry, paving projects, roads and bridges, all of which gets transferred from the public purse over to people who often as not happen to be campaign donors, as well as decisions over permits and economic policy. So $107.8 million to the BC Liberals over the time period we're looking at. Before that, it's dark. We don't know who donated, but this is the period of time that's relevant leading up to the next election. Total corporate donations over 70 million. So you can see that it's a huge proportion of the overall take, and it explains why they're so reluctant to ban corporate money heading into the next election. Some of the funny ones that pop out for me, I mean, numbered companies. What a numbered company is doing, donating to a political party, I don't know, but that's over $1 million. New car dealers, pharmaceutical companies, even the trophy hunters who threatened us with a legal letter after we pointed out the connections between some of their members and a little racist skit they put on in front of a couple of cabinet ministers after paying them a whole bunch of money. So one of the questions that comes up for me as a former journalist is, where is the media outrage? Like, if it's that easy to see this kind of soft corruption in our politics, how come the major media outlets in BC are not covering this story and giving it the due? that it deserves. Of course, it wouldn't be a surprise to you that all of the owners of all of the major media outlets in BC also donate to the BC Liberals, the governing party. So not huge donations. The Glacier Media Group, which includes Times Colonist, Burnaby Now, the Delta Optimist, $100,000. Post Media, which controls both daily newspapers in the province as well as the 24 Hours Commuter Daily and the National Post, and Black Press, which has 79 weekly papers. They're not huge donations, but they tell you which side the publishers of these papers fall on, and that is, I think, putting journalists in a very awkward position to know that their bosses have a vested interest in re-electing the current government. More money, of course, from the broadcast guys. That's where the real cash is these days. Shaw Communications, which controls Global News. That's the #1 rated newscast in the province. Rogers Group, which includes Maclean's and City TV. And Bell, which has CTV News and some private radio stations. All of them major donors to the BC Liberals. So we could really whack at this piñata all night. There's some interesting stuff that tumbles out. I encourage you to check out the Elections BC database. Anytime you're interested in a big project, I know our friends in Delta have some concerns about a 10-lane bridge that would replace the Massey Tunnel. As we found out this week, it turns out that the gentleman who proposed a giant casino that would be right at the off-ramp of the bridge happens to be another big money donor to the governing party. So it's that easy to connect the dots. I do encourage you to sit down with the Elections database. We're going to make a version of it that's even easier to search and allows you to see what contracts the same companies have got from the government as well, so that you can see if you can link the dots. And we're gonna crowdsource that research and ask people, because there's just thousands and thousands of examples for people across the province to have a look and tell us what they find. So what I really want to talk about tonight before we split into our breakup groups is real estate, because this is really the ugliest bump on the log. This, of course, is Mr. Donald Trump. He's the presumptive Republican nominee for president of the United States right now. Here he is in Vancouver. I'm guessing that's why he brought the gold umbrella, pictured with Eric and Donald Jr. and Ivanka and the CEO of the Holborn Group, which is the Malaysian development company that is building Trump Tower here in Vancouver. And of course, it should come as no surprise that the Trump Tower developers are major donors to the government, as well as all sorts of real estate brokers, agents, and development companies totaling at least $12 million from what Integrity BC has been able to total up. So more corporate donors heading into the 2017 election. Obviously, Holborn Group, Trump Towers, Rennie Marketing Systems. You might know Bob Rennie, the chief fundraiser for the governing party. He's also a condo marketer and gets lots of his well-heeled friends to keep getting his preferred party reelected. HSBC, notorious money launderers and part architects of the 2008 financial collapse. The Bank of China. Why are these banks donating money to a political party in British Columbia? Interesting story came out last week about panda bonds, which are a financial product underwritten by the Bank of China and HSBC that provide a vehicle to turn liquid Chinese currency into AAA-rated government bonds in British Columbia, which can then be used as collateral for other investments, including real estate. So this is our finance minister, Mike DeYoung, at the bond sale talking to brokers in Beijing. And we get to live with the results of an unregulated property market that has fueled itself through money laundering, fraud, and the injection of cash from all over the world into land as a kind of Swiss bank, no questions asked. So this is a property on 29th Avenue. Any guesses for what the asking price is on this? You are correct. I think it's an open question, whether they will get the asking price or more. But we can see that the property market in Vancouver has become completely unhinged from normal supply and demand. And of course, these prices, when you think about what the median wage is in Vancouver, like the kind of family that could afford to live in that house is never going to be able to pay off a mortgage that size. So these houses are not being used as homes primarily. They're a financial product being sold to investors around the world. So this is our Premier's economic growth strategy. This is the sum total of the vision that this government has for our province, and I would sum it up like this. Basically, you turn houses into an investment vehicle, and you invite unregulated foreign money in, no questions asked. You take everything that the government controls or owns and sell it off, like campsites. We saw that campsites are being sold off now to private companies in Europe that then turn around and resell them just like airline tickets to people who want to go camping in British Columbia. I mean, it's a small example, but it gives you a sense of the mentality of this government when everything that was once considered public is for sale, and often to people who are major donors to the party. Like on Burke Mountain, we saw a major land sale for way below the appraised value. It just so happened that the same guy turned around and donated almost $1 million to the BC Liberals. It's hard to see these instances as coincidental. This has real human costs. This takes a toll on the fabric of our city, of our society, and the future of our economy. And I just wanted to share this quick story. This weekend, one of my best friends had to move away. My sister, pictured here with her puppy, and my grandma, who lives in Burnaby. I don't know what her house is worth, but probably quite a bit. And this is a family that's been here since 1900. We've had 4 generations here for the last 116 years. And through 2 world wars and a depression and the Japanese internment, we've always found a way to come back. And finally, it's gotten to a point where I don't think there's a future for us much longer in this city. And so I'm still here because there's an election to fight next year. But other than that, I understand all of my friends who are just bugging out. If you want to have kids, if you want to start a family, even if you're a homeowner and you want to realize some of that equity, some of that astronomical value on paper, you can't just try to get back into the Vancouver market. It means either moving away from grandkids or moving to an unfamiliar town, and that's what my mother did. So now my mom and my sister, 2 of the strongest people in my life and a huge source of support. I mean, I have a dog, I don't have a kid, and I just lost half the babysitters for the dog. So I have no idea how people are going to raise their families without that kind of close-knit support. So we're tearing families apart both from the place that they call home, which is really important, and we're taking generations and separating grandchildren from grandkids. So these are the human costs of this policy. Now this is where my sister's moving, so it's not so bad. This is the Kispiox River Valley, and I was up there over the weekend helping my mom get moved in. And it was a good reminder to me of all the things that British Columbia still has, because living in the city, it can get pretty dark getting up and reading the newspaper every day. And what I realize every time I go up to the Skeena up north is just how lucky we are to live in this province. I mean, we have all of the ingredients for an incredibly strong and thriving economy and society. We just have rotten leadership. And so I think that with the renewable energy resources we have, wind, water, and solar, with the kind of talent that we have, the innovation and the culture that is driven in our cities, and the workforce, the people around the province, we could build a really cool place to live for the next 100 years or 200 years. But we need to do something right now about the political leadership and the direction that they're taking us. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. Any thoughts on how you dismantle a system that is this entrenched? I mean, it's been like this since BC was founded. There are examples of sketchy land swaps that go back to the 1800s with the Scottish coal barons that came over and bought up these huge tracts of government land. It's been going on for over a century. So how do we dismantle the system? That's the question that we want to look at tonight. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Instilling more a sense of pride of the home that we're in, because you're talking about people who are opposed to moving away. That's how a lot of people are feeling, like we're losing our sense of our home. It's dissolving.
Instilling a sense of pride in where we're from. I think that's really important. First Nations talk a lot about place-based politics and about place-based power, and I think that a lot of us who come from immigrant cultures or families where booms and busts have just forced us to migrate around the country, it's really hard to get a sense that you're from anywhere, that you have a home, or that you deserve to call a given place home. And so I think, despite the fact that we know that the underlying title to this land is unceded, this is Coast Salish land, that we are also here, and you're right. I think that we need to cultivate a sense of pride in the place that we're from. And that's where I think our strength is going to come from. Other thoughts on how to dismantle a system? Yeah, up here.
Do we have a political party that's not beholden to this system?
Could we have a political party that's not beholden to the system? I proposed a spoof party that is completely beholden to the system. I wonder if anybody is thinking about another party. I think there's two ways to go about that. Founding a party is a lot of work. Forcing the existing parties to change their position towards this kind of money might be less work. So we're thinking about ways between now and the next election to start putting pressure on the candidates from the grassroots up in order to inspire some of them to come forward and swear off this kind of money in their campaigns. Other ideas about how to take this apart? Yeah. We haven't been involved in designing any litigation, but I have started to hear people talk about maybe a class action lawsuit for all of the young families whose homes and their ownership dreams have been destroyed. I mean, I think there's a few angles that you could attack on.
I sent you an email. I sent it to John Morgan because the China's CITIC bank tried to seize real estate assets in Canada.
Yeah.
They were kind of tired of waiting
Yeah.
for a response from Canada, so the bank has moved in. There is you should really go after the banks and the real estate agents for aiding and abetting in theft. This is money that's stolen out of China. Chinese banks. So the banks that are complicit, the real estate agents are complicit. So sometimes you're looking for a crack in the dam.
That's a very good point. So,
Could you repeat?
yeah,
Under criminal code 21.1, 21.2. I can give you the website.
so the gentleman here is suggesting going after the banks for aiding and abetting money laundering and criminal activity.
Would you join the Chinese bank, CITIC bank, in helping them go after the money?
The same suggestion has been made by Mark Cajotes, who's a famous short seller who just came out of retirement to bet against the Canadian housing market. He was one of the guys who bet against the US housing market in 2008. So you're right, and I think you bring up a really important point, which is that this is about money, not the origin point or the ethnicity of the people who carry it. Okay. I can't comment on Rennie's involvement. I don't know. But it's worth investigating. Yeah. Going after the banks. I like that.
I have another idea.
Yeah.
That's going after the federal government to delay projects to the point where they're not even feasible anymore. Just keep delaying them. Approval.
Dogwood has two other campaigns that center around this tactic of delay on both the oil tanker project and the thermal coal projects, where we've targeted federal decision makers and succeeded in buying several years so far in which they haven't been able to build Enbridge or Kinder Morgan. I think that's a good idea. Thought at the back, yeah.
Last year, a professor from UBC, I've forgotten his name, organized something called Grandparents for Climate Action, and they were really ticked off about what's coming up if we don't do something. He and a bunch of his friends paid for a full-page advertisement in every newspaper in British Columbia at that time. I'm looking at this sheet that we have here showing what you started your talk about. I'm thinking this would be apolitical, not very liberal or NDP or Green, etc. But it seems to me that it might be a tremendously powerful thing under the banner "Wake Up British Columbia" or something like that. Do you see what we're saying?
So the suggestion is using newspaper ads or other vehicles to provide a public service announcement to people about who is funding the upcoming election. Yeah, Sam.
I think we can build powerful enough and big enough teams in our communities so that in the election next spring, when our politicians are looking to pander for votes, they're going to have to pander to us, and we're going to be asking for better than we've currently got. And I think if we can do that, they won't have a choice.
So Sam is suggesting building a large block of voters, people who are not committed partisans who are going to just vote for whichever party based on loyalty, but who are looking for a candidate, a champion who will come forward and actually make promises to that group of voters around how they're going to conduct themselves in the election and what they're going to do once they're elected, i.e. Ban big money through legislation. It's a great idea. Yeah, in the back there.
Have you thought of involving somebody like Lead Now, who have a large block of voters?
There are some folks here tonight from Lead Now. I would say they are dipping their toes. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
I think I'm sort of speaking to the same thing, the business of, there are a lot of progressive, eco and generally progressive economic, or associations, groups, clubs, whatever, out there.
Mm-hmm.
Building links, building stronger links
For sure. Yeah, and it's a function of working on so many different important issues. One thing that I love about the Big Money campaign is that it brings together a whole bunch of things that I personally am really worried about but don't have time to work on individually. Like, we don't have a housing campaign, we don't have an LNG campaign, we don't have real estate practices or big banks campaign. But all of those industries fall under the umbrella of the same root problem, which is that they have unlimited capacity to buy political influence in the current system. So we're going to move forward and springboard off of one of the ideas that's already come up to talk about the basic recipe for organizing ourselves over the next year, because of course we have an election coming up, which is a major opportunity to change. We have all of the parties other than the governing parties so far that have pledged to support legislation to ban corporate union and unlimited foreign donations. And so it's a question of securing a majority from whatever combination of parties is willing to support this legislation. And that involves both putting pressure on the opposition parties and on the sitting Liberal MLAs. So here are the first 3 steps, and then we're going to get into our groups and talk about what we can do next in a more fine-grained way. We've put up an online petition at banbigmoney.ca. And the reason we do these online petitions is for 2 reasons. Partly, when you put your postal code in, it tells us where you live, what riding you live in. And that's really important to politicians because they only care about people that can either vote them in or vote them out in their own riding. And so what it allows us to do is tell people, well, this is exactly how many people support this campaign in your riding, and those are people who you're going to have to get past if you intend to get elected by thumbing your nose at them on this issue. The other reason, of course, is so that we can stay in touch. I mean, all of you were invited tonight via email, and it's a way of quickly spreading the word about campaign updates, developments, and that's why we use email as our primary tool for communication. The second step is to meet your local Dogwood team, and we've already put people into geographic teams tonight, so we're a step ahead. And the third step is to organize your neighbors. And so Tracy is going to come up and give us a crash course in how we do that.
Thank you, everyone. So this is our city. And in each one of these places, we have a team. In some places, we've been working for 2 or 3 years through several elections now to build power with our elected officials. In the federal election, we built teams to get out the vote. We went out and identified voters who care about the issues that we care about. And we made sure that we were building relationships with the candidates who are being elected so they knew what was important to the voters in their ridings, and those voters are us. And we also went out and had tons of conversations, neighbor to neighbor. How we build power is through trusting relationships with people we already know and we already care about. So I imagine that a lot of you have networks of people who care about similar things, but we have to be organized. So we have neighborhood teams in all of these ridings. You should all be in your neighborhood teams now, and we're going to take a moment to just talk within our neighborhoods about why we came here tonight and why this is important to us. And then you'll hear from your table leaders what is actually happening in your neighborhood that you can jump onto for organizing. So we're out all summer at community events. We're meeting with our government officials now, getting ready, and we need your help, definitely. So we already have a force of about 100 volunteers in the Lower Mainland who are active now, and we need you to join them.